Welcome into the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. I'm Rick Gehman. That right there is Greg DuCharme, and we are here to put a big bow on the PGA Championship. Greg, welcome in. It's good to see you, and this one will certainly be living in my brain for a lot of different reasons for a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of great storylines coming out of this championship, Rick. A lot of great memories were created, and I think importantly, we've changed a lot of narratives. The story on many of these players has really changed this week, and that's something that makes major championships so special.
Yeah, perception leading into the week for maybe two, three, four different golfers seems to be wildly different than where it is right now. And as we know, Greg, perception is often reality. The thing, before we even start naming names and getting into this, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's so hard to remember how many high-end players that we have on the PGA Tour. And when you start seeing them play to their ceilings, Colin Morikawa breaking out a little bit after a slump, and Victor Hovland doing the same. There are so many guys that their best is really, really good.
Yeah, this is one of those tournaments heading in where we thought there were maybe 10 players who could win, similar to what we saw at Bethpage Black back in 2009, where the golf course is so long, the rough is going to be so thick. The setup of the golf course creates this atmosphere where the number of players who can compete is very much limited. Now, I would say, Rick, that it turned out a little bit different than that, the way the course actually played. But still, a couple of those players were on that list, and you were wondering at the beginning of the week, can they really win? Could they really win a PGA championship, which is a big difference from can they play well? Can they compete? Can you actually win? That seems to be a very limited number. And next time we get to a major championship at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst, and later on in the year, for the Open Championship, I think the answers to those questions are going to look a little bit different based on what we saw this week.
Yeah, we're halfway through major championship season, a month away from the U.S. Open at Pinehurst #2. And then, of course, we'll wrap it up at Troon with the Open Championship. But this past week, it was Xander Schauffele who hoisted the Wanamaker. And Greg, let's just go back to Wednesday of the week. Xander Schauffele was probably considered the best player in the world without a major championship. That is a very good distinction to have because it means that people think that you're great and you're an excellent player and you should be winning majors. But to have that goose egg in your column is something that hangs over you and does not leave until you get the job done.
Yeah, especially when you've contended and competed in so many of them. When you've contended and competed so regularly on the PGA Tour, and it seems like the one thing holding you back is actually closing the door and winning. We have known for a long time, Rick, that Xander Schauffele's game is there. It has been there. It's been good enough to win, and that's why, again, at the beginning of the week, can Xander Schauffele win the PGA Championship? It kind of made you pause. Yes, he has the game. Yes, you look at numbers, and this is a player who comes in second in strokes gained total, second in scoring average, both adjusted and actual. He's second in bogey avoidance on the PGA Tour, top 10 in both of the ball striking statistics, and pretty darn good in his short game and putting. Xander Schauffele's game is clearly good enough to win, but could he actually walk through the door and get that monkey off his back? It was a huge question, and look, we try to be pretty objective here on the first cut and look at things with a from a wide lens and accept that this is golf and there are crazy outcomes that happen every single week. But that was still a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah, it was, and I like the way that he did answer it and how this tournament shook itself out. He gets off to an incredibly hot start. He shoots a 9 under 62, which at the time was I guess it still is the lowest major championship round that we have seen. And then you get a three-shot lead that you have to sleep on after 18 holes, Greg. And after 36 holes, it was down to one shot. And after 54 holes, there was no lead. He was tied with Colin Morikawa at the top. This felt like looking at it that way, that this event could slip away from him. And the critics were getting their bullhorns ready. They were prepared to say he let another one slip through his fingers.
Yes, and there were many moments when it could have slipped through his fingers. I mean, this is why majors are so special and why they are so hard to win. Xander Schauffele goes out and shoots 62. Okay, only the fourth person ever to shoot 62 in a major championship. Then he shoots 68, 68 in back-to-back rounds, and this thing is wide open. Right? It has to come down to a 65 on Sunday in order for him to win. And Rick, it's on the 72nd hole where he makes a birdie to win by one. He shoots 62, 68, 68, 65, and wins by one in a major. There are moments when you look at this scorecard here. There's a moment at number 6 where he makes a big par save. It could have slipped away from him there. Number 7, he makes birdie. He got up and down from a difficult situation, short-sided in a bunker. That one could have slipped away. Number 10, he makes a bogey that easily, and in the past it has completely derailed him. But he answered the bell every single time, to the point where, looking back at it now, the bogey at 10, which was a criticized decision, I think it actually looks like a key decision if you're looking to get into his mindset, because he played aggressive, he played to win. That's why you get a 65 out of him, and that's why he's holding that big trophy.
I would frame this scorecard. I would frame this if I was Xander Schauffele. Print it out, put it somewhere that you look every single day, because I thought it was really impressive with the way that he got it done on Sunday. You mentioned the 65, but it was slow and steady, just picking off his birdie opportunities when they arose. And when he did make that bogey on 10, he was able to immediately bounce back with not one, but 2 birdies in a row. And then to stand on the 72nd hole, Greg, he is getting pressure applied, not from his own group, not from Colin Morikawa, but from the groups out in front, specifically Victor Hovland and Bryson DeChambeau. Xander knows he needs to make a birdie on 18 to win a major championship. A par, that's going to force a playoff with a guy you probably don't want to play in a playoff, and that's what Xander said afterwards. I'm referring to Bryson there. So this was about the biggest moment that you could ask for. This is not a major championship falling into the hands of Xander Schauffele because someone else melted down. This is him knowing he has to go get it and grabbing it.
Yes, and think about what happens after he hits his tee shot. He wisely avoids the one mistake he can't make, which is hitting it into the water right of the fairway on 18. He hits it over by the bunker to the left edge of the fairway where it seemed like everybody was aiming, and he gets a bad break. I mean, on 17, his ball is about a foot from being perfect and ends up back in the bunker. On 18, it could be a yard either way, and it's in a better situation. If it goes in the bunker, that's a much easier situation. If it stays short and he has a stance, that's a much easier situation. That is a club lengths difference. And all of a sudden, he's on the 72nd hole with all that pressure you just outlined, Rick, and he's got the ball above his feet up to his shins, and his feet are in a bunker, and he's got a big decision to make. And there's not really very many great options. And he executes the shot. He takes what I believe to be the most aggressive shot he could have played, and he hits it into a perfect spot to get up and down for birdie, and he does. That is special stuff.
Yeah, we were greenside. We were left of the green on 18 there. So he had that. I don't even know what the yardage was. 40 yards. How long do you think that was?
I think it was 43 yards for his third
Okay.
shot.
So 43 yards. He left it in a great spot. Again, like you said, knowing he has to get up and down, 5-foot putt or so that it doesn't pour itself in. It kind of catches the lip and drops. It doesn't matter. It goes down. I thought during that entire routine, he looked like the same guy who teed off Thursday Thursday on hole number one, right? I mean, he seemed cool, calm, and collected, like he was going through his entire routine. I didn't see anything that changed, and I think that goes back to what he was talking about Saturday night, which actually got a little bit of criticism. Greg, he said something like, it's just a result. Whatever happens, it's just a result. I hope it's a good one, but let the chips fall where they may is kind of the paraphrase of what he said, and he got criticized for that. And I think what he really means, and if you were to talk to a sports psychologist about this, is that it doesn't matter how big, small, medium an event is, or a shot is, or a moment is. If you go through your process, you can detach process from result, but you have to convince yourself that everything is just the result.
Yes, and I was very not critical of that. I was critical of the critics in that, and I felt like the people who were criticizing those comments from Xander were just simply looking at Xander and criticizing him. And anything that Xander said in that moment would have been criticized and used as foreshadowing for when the expected fall came from Xander Schauffele. But truth be told, that's exactly the right thing to say. I mean, you think about all the work that he has put in throughout his career, and especially lately, that has led to this phenomenal player who is essentially the second best player that we have on the PGA Tour. And all of that comes from work that he's put in, and the work leads to results. And so what he's saying is, hey, I've done my preparation, and I'm going to go out there tomorrow, and I'm going to trust it. And I'm going to trust the process. This is something that all the legends of the game have talked about. Xander did it as well, but it hasn't worked for him the way it worked for, say, Tiger Woods, who said that, or Jack Nicklaus, who said that. So it looks a little bit different. So yeah, Rick, I thought it was unfair criticism.
Well, it doesn't matter how fair or unfair it was. Xander Schauffele is a major champion. However, that's just one of the many storylines that came from Valhalla this past week. We are going to continue this conversation of the First Cut podcast live on CBS Sports Network after these words. Well, welcome back to the First Cut podcast live on CBS Sports Network. We are adding another voice to the conversation, and that's one you probably heard while watching the coverage this week. That's Mark Immelman. Hey, Mark.
Hi, boys. Apparently Xander's play was a lot more timely than my travel this morning, so I'm sorry I'm late, but nice to be here with you guys.
That's all right. We've got you ready to rock and roll right now. As Mark mentioned, Xander Schauffele breaks through, gets the job done, but it was not without plenty of resistance at Valhalla. So I want to talk, gents, about some of the chase pack, because this came down to the very last putt. This was not decided until the final stroke on the 72nd hole. The closest chaser was Bryson DeChambeau, who posted 20 under par just a few minutes before Xander came through that 18th hole. And Mark, this was a display that was, to use a word of yours, virtuoso on Sunday. He was dialed in all day long. He gave himself plenty of opportunities. He fired a 7 under 64 and applied all the pressure that Xander could handle.
Yeah, most certainly. I would almost say, because myself and my colleagues spoke about it in preparation for the final round before our CBS broadcast, and I had Bryson on Saturday. And he put together a pretty pedestrian round. I think it was 5 under at the time, where I didn't think he had his best stuff. He drove the ball pretty well. His iron game was spotty. I thought the wedge game wasn't as sharp as what he could be. And he missed a few putts. Yet all that being said, he puts together a round that gets him into contention for Sunday for a bit of a charge. Now, look, that round on Saturday was highlighted by a pretty fast finish with a chip-in eagle there on the 18th hole. But you could almost see him carry that momentum into the final round. And when he got out early, he just kept on building. And then for each birdie he made and each shot he hit, it just seemed like the groundswell, because the crowds out there in Louisville were incredible. You got the sense almost that nearly every single one of the guys and the fans there in Louisville were sort of carrying him to the finish. And Bryson just relished this. Each chair he got, he played up to it. I mean, he was like the ultimate showman. I had the group of Shane Lowry and Sahith Theegala, and we were right behind Bryson. And it seemed like the noise, the crowds, the emotion, if you will, that they were pouring forth, he was just drinking in. And it got him swinging harder off the tee. I mean, he bludgeoned a few drives off the final couple holes, and he had some really quality shots. I feel like that 8-iron into 16 was banner. I mean, that thing was from the top drawer. And in the end, came up just a buck shy. But you have to hand it to him because he took what he learned in Augusta National when he came up a little bit short, worked on his putting. The short game got better under pressure Sunday. And so as a result, with his B game, as he points it out, kind of kept himself in contention and had a real legit shot to get into a playoff.
Bryson always has his B game, if you ask him. He always thinks there's a little bit of more juice to squeeze out of it. I'm glad Mark mentioned the support that we saw out there this week, and that was my experience as well. You know, I think it was a very pro Scotty Scheffler crowd, and then right behind Scotty Scheffler, I think it was Bryson DeChambeau number 2. They were out there in full force for the big golfer, but Greg, not as big as he used to be. Looks very fit. He's got his game in phenomenal shape. He's been playing well on Live Golf. He played well at the Masters. It's another great major championship result. It's something that I want to try to figure out. Like, what is the next 12 months look like for Bryson?
Well, you know, Rick, that's the challenging thing with the players that have gone over to Live, right? You connect things to meaning. And when you look at the PGA Tour, there's a very clear connection between the PGA Tour schedule, the FedEx Cup points, the majors, the playoffs, the exemptions, getting into the big events on the PGA Tour. That stuff is all, because it's been around for so long, it's all very well orchestrated. And the fans, if they don't already, have a very clear understanding of how all that works. So we sit here on shows like this and discuss, what does it mean? What does this mean for Bryson? It probably means people are going to pay attention to him when he gets back to the U.S. Open at Pinehurst. What does it mean in between? I don't know. I mean, most people probably don't even know what his schedule looks like going forward, which is a great misfortune of the entire situation we have with Live. Perhaps some more people follow his YouTube channel and check that kind of thing out as a result of this. But essentially, the schedule for Bryson DeChambeau, as far as many of the fans is concerned, comes down to just 4 events a year. What are we going to get out of him in the majors? And so it's very important that they play well. And I give him a lot of respect for putting up such a fantastic effort, right? Your chances to put your stamp on a season for someone who's playing on Live is very limited at this point. I mean, it's really limited to 4 events, like I said. So that's not a lot of opportunity for you to, you know, put your name back in the ring. And Bryson has stepped up in both the first 2 opportunities that he's had.
The Live schedule is 2 events in June, however, just 1 before the U.S. Open. So those golfers, Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, amongst others, will have 3 more competitive rounds before they tee it up at the number 2 course at Pinehurst for the U.S. Open. It was Viktor Hovland, Mark, alongside Bryson DeChambeau, and he has been a completely different golfer from 2023 when he won the FedEx Cup to 2024, where he looked lost. He did confirm that within the last week or so, he reunited with his swing coach, Joe Mayo, and those dividends paid off very, very quickly. 3 birdies in a row, 5, 6, and 7 on Sunday. He then birdied 3 out of 4 holes as he made his turn: 10, 11, 12, 13, every hole there but number 11. This was a final round 66 that he had, Mark, an opportunity to tie Bryson at 20 under. It would not have been good enough, but I imagine all signs are encouraging for Viktor Hovland coming out of this week.
Yeah, if you would permit me, I'm going to borrow my colleague Jim Nance's line that he used on 12 that we all giggled at. And he said, everything works or tastes a little better with a little mayo. Look, there's no doubt, because this is a guy in Viktor Hovland who this year has been in the wilderness. I mean, he has searched everywhere. He's seen multiple swing coaches. He considered not even playing in the PGA Championship, given that his game was so bad. But the weekend before, flew over to Vegas, had dinner with Joe. They worked on the game the following day, and almost immediately, and I use that term lightly because there's nothing immediate in golf, he sort of sensed a feel where he started to hit the ball more solidly again, because he was hitting the ball okay, and the numbers were okay, but the ball wasn't hitting the button. And under pressure in these sorts of events, you just have to hit the ball solidly to have it go the right distance. And as I had him, because he played alongside Bryson on Saturday in that group there, as I watched him play and as I watched him warm up, it's almost like he grew in stature. Because when you're making a change with your golf swing, there's that sort of seedling time, if you will, where it's trying to grow a bit of a taproot. But what he and Joe seemed to do was, it was a very simple move. It was all a feel where his arms went in the downswing to straighten off the swing path, and the ball flight just came out way straighter. I spoke with Shay Knight, his caddy, prior to the third round, and I said, Shay, these things are flying straight, because ordinarily I was seeing a whole lot of curve from left to right. And he smiled. He said, yeah. And the only club that was really curving some was the driver, and I feel like it was spending some power for Victor. But what he did well was what you had to do around then, and that was hit quality medium iron shots. And his distance control was good. Like I said, it looked like he grew in confidence. And then it looked like he almost got swept up in the groundswell alongside Bryson, and he was relevant for a long, long time. And I'm certain for Victor, look, the third place finish is nice and all, but he's the kind of guy where we correlate his name, like a Xander, with future major championships. So I'm certain after this, he feels, okay, now we've got a little something we can build on as we head into the second portion of the season. Because let's not forget, last year when he won the FedEx Cup, it was kind of a late season charge that he put on. So maybe this was the catalyst. But if you're Victor Hovland's camp right now, you're breathing a whole lot easier, because things were tough sledding for the first few months of this year.
Certainly, indeed. And we mentioned earlier the gift and the curse of being Xander Schauffele, the best player in the world without a major championship. Well, maybe now that gift and that curse moves to Victor Hovland. And Greg, when you look at this round on Sunday, we were out there walking the grounds, and there was different times where, oh, Xander's going to win. It's definitely going to be Bryson. It's definitely going to be Victor, right? There's 3 or 4 different guys that at some point on Sunday, while we were out there, we thought that they were going to win. And when Victor made his final birdie of the day on 13 to complete 3 out of 4, that felt like it was going to be Victor who had the momentum. He had opportunities coming down the stretch on every single hole. He did not convert any of them, stalled out a little bit. If 1 or 2 fall, maybe it's a little bit different story.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because he still had a very makeable putt on the 72nd hole to tie Bryson, which at the beginning of the day, I thought 20 would be enough to win. And it turns out it wasn't even enough for a playoff. But that being said, you look at what Victor Hovland did, and when you felt like he had a chance to win, it really started around number 4. He hit a great wedge shot in there. He then made birdie at 5 and another birdie at 6. And you started to see Victor Hovland swelling with confidence. And he started to look like vintage Victor Hovland. And all of a sudden, he's hitting it right at the flag. You think about these super aggressive plays that highlighted his playoff run last year. You got number 6, number 10, 12, 15, 16, 17. All of these iron shots are right at the flag. Sometimes he had the distance right. Sometimes he left himself 15, 20 feet like he did on 16, right after Bryson, by the way, hit it in there to 3 feet. Victor Hovland hit one right over the flagstick, 25 feet long, but right on top of it, which was just an awesome shot. He hit it inside of 10 feet at number 17. He was looking right at the flag and hitting it right there. And, to Mark's point about the change with Joseph Mayo, what sticks out to me, this also sticks out about Colin Morikawa. It's easier to go back to something that's familiar. And all of a sudden, it just starts to click a little bit. Instead of going to somewhere new where you've never been before, both Victor and Colin have gone back. They've gone back home in essence. And now all of a sudden, I've done this before. I've had this same feeling in my swing before. I know that it works. Becomes a lot easier to trust, and it reduces the time that it takes for that process to take place.
Solo third for Victor Hovland. And since Greg mentioned it, Mark, let's talk about Colin Morikawa. I don't think we need to dwell on this too long, but it was just simply not his day on Sunday. He made 16 pars, he made one bogey, and he did not make his first birdie of the day until the 18th hole, when the golf tournament sets the all-time major championship scoring record. A Sunday 71 is not going to get it done.
No, but still, I think the future looks brighter for Colin despite the finish there. The takeaways for me as I watched him play was in preparation, he looked like he knew what he was doing. There was conviction, there was commitment to the preparation, to the practice. He looked like he had a little swagger about him as he was walking around the place. He didn't look kind of as doubtful. And as I watched him and his caddy JJ between shots a little bit, the time that was being taken earlier this season because there was some doubt perhaps and some indecision, it looked like he was a whole lot more committed, and the shots were getting the clubs were getting pulled quicker, and the shots were getting hit earlier. And yes, he hit 16 greens yesterday, but it just wasn't there. He left himself a few putts that were too long, and in the end, on the final day, when you're in contention at an event like this where the scoring was low, you just have to hit the ball hole high a bunch, give yourself a lot of looks inside of 20 feet, and hopefully make a few. And he battled a bulky putter on top of all of that. So not the best day for him, but in the end, it's still another major championship he's contended in, and that's never a bad thing, because that's all you can do, right? Is you could put yourself into contention Sunday and just kind of see what transpires.
Yeah, his major championship career is off to an excellent start. And I think we're off to an excellent start, but we're not even remotely close to being done. I want to talk about Valhalla. I want to talk about Scotty. I want to talk about a lot more things. We're going to continue the First Cut podcast live on CBS Sports Network after this break. Welcome back to the First Cut podcast live on CBS Sports Network. That's Greg DuCharme and Mark Immelman. I'm Rick Gehman. We are talking PGA Championship, and now we're talking about Valhalla. When you have a major championship, Mark, sometimes the players, the characters, they are the storyline. Sometimes the golf course, the venue is the storyline. So let's talk about that venue. And this is a place we've seen before, 2014, 2000. It's got a great history of producing excellent leaderboards and champions, but it always gets a little bit, what's the word? A little bit hairy when the scores are so good. And you're seeing that on your screen right now. You know, scoring records fell this week in Louisville, and I know that there are a lot of people who don't like that.
Yeah, but you know what? In the end, low score wins, and I don't think Xander Schauffele cares whether he's 21 or 1 under par. You know, the low guy's going to win the championship. As it pertains to Valhalla, you talked about 14 with Rory, who's a star, a superstar, and then of course the Tiger Woods Bob May playoff, which was epic. And then there was 96 with Mark Brooks beating Kenny Perry in a playoff, after Kenny Perry had went and sat in the booth alongside Jim Nantz there for a while, and then didn't prepare adequately for the playoffs. So the homeboy and Kenny Perry didn't pull off the famous victory there. So we kind of knew, we had the sense that this was going to be special because Valhalla, the way it flows, the way it finishes with that stretch of holes, it has the tendency to spit out big winners, you know, and just the length of the golf course, the way it was playing and how soft it was always going to lend itself to the power guys. And you saw some of that near the top of the leaderboard with Xander, who's not short, and Bryson, who's prodigious, and Victor's not short. So it handed the edge to those guys. And the truth of the matter is, as far as the golf course goes, its design is great. Jack Nicklaus knows what he's doing. It was very, very fair. I had 2 beefs with it, and the one of them you can't control in Mother Nature, because this time of the year, you're going to have summertime rain, and summertime rain kind of dulls the teeth of any golf course. I don't care what the design is. And when a golf course gets soft like this one was, it becomes a big dartboard for these guys. And if the ball stops rolling where it lands, they're going to have a field day, and everybody did. The second thing too, though, and this is awesome for the membership, and certainly awesome for a recovering golfer like me, Zoysia fairways are just fantastic to hit off for the club golfer because the ball sits up so well. For the professional, they could hit anything off those fairways. I mean, I saw chip shots and pitch shots in practice and during the tournament where guys were spinning the cover off balls and just getting these chips to hit and stick. So I feel like the Zoysia fairways for the players at the elite level like this are almost a little too forgiving. Now we have it at East Lake as well, but East Lake is just another long brute, and just because par is 70 there, it doesn't get as far under. But you give guys a damp golf course, Zoysia fairways, rough that was punitive, but nothing to stop someone who can just bludgeon the ball out there like a Bryson DeChambeau. If you put the ball in play, ball in hand for a few days, you're going to see birdies, and we did. And in the end, I think it was a whole lot of fun because I got to tell you, walking down the final 9 holes there, it was loud. And the cool thing about the design of that golf course, the front side's kind of open and there are lots of viewing lanes. The back 9 sort of weaves between the trees, almost like Muirfield Village, another Jack Nicklaus venue. But the thing about that is, as you guys know from Augusta, you get crowds in there and they start shouting and screaming. The sound kind of echoes around the place and it was wild. I mean, the vibe out there yesterday afternoon was cool. So I think in the end, despite the traffic issues and the weather and such, I think Valhalla was a great venue.
Yeah, it was absolutely packed early in the day, all day long. Everybody stayed. It was good stuff. And Greg, when you look at golf courses, and this is something that we've heard Justin Thomas say in the past, and I tend to agree with this, there is no yardage that plays defense for these players. It's going to be 8,000 yards, 8,500. Distance is really not a detriment. The thing that gets these guys is firm and fast conditions because the ball, you cannot control it when it's on the ground. And when you've got firm and fast conditions, the ball is on the ground and it's moving quite a bit. The idea of that makes perfect sense. The execution of that, unfortunately, is often out of our control because of what Mark talked about. Mother Nature doesn't care about firm and fast. Mother Nature is going to do what she's going to do.
Yes, and it's unfortunate. I've had a lot of conversations with Mother Nature about making all majors firm and fast, and she just doesn't listen because it is unavoidable. And the thing that Justin Thomas said, and you just echoed, Rick, is so spot on. The distance, we saw it at Erin Hills. I mean, Erin Hills was basically 8,000 yards, and Brooks Koepka won at 16 or 17 under par in a U.S. Open. We've seen U.S. Opens played under 7,000 yards at Marion and have Justin Rose win at 1 under. So the length doesn't equal the difficulty, and the same is true about the rough. Rough, when it's thick, it doesn't mean you can't handle it. These PGA Tour players can handle a rough of just about any length. They can handle just about any distance of golf course. As long as they have control over their golf ball. And you lose control of the golf ball when conditions get firm, when wind blows, when it is actively raining. And we didn't see very much of that this week where it was actively raining. We saw a lot of play after rain, which is the easiest conditions you can possibly get. And we also had no wind. 0 wind throughout the entire week. I don't think it was double digits, even in the gusts. I don't think it was double digits for the entire week. So, I mean, go back and think about the venues that have seen a 20 under par or better score. You have now Valhalla with 21 under par. You have Whistling Straits when Jason Day won. There was also no wind that week and a pretty soft golf course. You have Augusta National in November when it was extremely receptive. And that one sticks out to me, Rick, because you could hit the ball. The players were hitting the ball to those places around Augusta National where you normally can never hit it. You can't get it up and down from there. But it's soft enough and they were able to. Changes the entire complexity of the golf course. So if you're going to come down on the design of Valhalla, I think it's a mistake. And I think it's in large part overlooking the conditions.
Okay, well, we'll continue trying with Mother Nature. We'll see if she can return our phone calls, but there's still plenty more to discuss here. Scotty Scheffler, some guys who might have concerns moving forward, and of course, we are going to look ahead to that Charles Schwab Challenge going to be played next week as the tour continues to roll on. We'll continue that conversation after a quick break. Well, welcome back to the First Cut podcast on CBS Sports Network. And while Xander Schauffele is the winner of the PGA Championship, Bryson and Victor Hovland came close. The story that I will certainly remember, boys, is Scotty Scheffler. And everything that went down on Friday as the world's number one was arrested trying to enter in Valhalla and charged, detained, taken to prison. A mugshot appeared. These are words that I cannot imagine would ever come out of my mouth. Mark, from a golf perspective, he played unbelievable on Friday when he showed up late after his round, and then really struggled on Saturday. Maybe it was the absence of his caddy, Ted Scott. Maybe it was just an adrenaline dump and it finally caught up to him. But he goes out and shoots one of the best rounds that we saw on Sunday, flies up the leaderboard, finishes at 13 under par and in a tie for 8th. And it was highlighted by, you're seeing him right now, 5 birdies on that second 9.
Yeah, and you have guys like Rory McIlroy and Max Homa and a number of these PGA Tour stars who now have to live with the fact that they were knocked off by a guy who spent some time in jail on the second round. Yeah, look, it was one of those days on Friday morning when I woke up because we had the early call. We were supposed to go in and do some relief for ESPN, where our boss texts the group chain and he goes, you guys better get moving. The traffic out here is just silly. It's taken like 2 hours to get to the golf course for what was normally a 20-minute trip. And then he spoke of the fact that there had been an accident. Sadly, there was a fatality and John Mills lost his life. And the next thing we see is Scotty has been arrested. And I wouldn't have had that on my bingo card in my wildest dreams. And so I remember getting to the golf course and it was kind of a surreal sort of a feeling because here everyone's sort of putting the thing together in real time, like what's happening, what's going to happen to him. Then we hear the charges and stuff, and it's sounding downright sinister. And then in the end, all of a sudden, Scotty's getting out and Scotty's getting to the golf course. So now I've gone from fascinated to wildly intrigued. And so we went out and I went and watched him warm up for that Friday morning round. Now, let's bear in mind that his warm up was cut short. He had like 30 minutes, and ordinarily he'll take like an hour and a half. He did some stretching in the jail cell before the time, which was kind of crazy. But I watched him go through the warm-ups, and he was just so measured and so disciplined. And I was fascinated by this. Just the fact that it didn't look like, if you didn't know he had just been in jail and his adrenaline and all of his sensibilities were on high edge, you wouldn't have known it because the guy just looked so cool and calm and collected. And this had me just intrigued. And then he gets out there and he birdies his very first hole. And I remember in our green room, everybody cheered out loud. And ordinarily we'd cheer if there's no playoffs. Okay, that's why we cheer for golf. Where here, everyone just goes bananas because Scotty's made an opening birdie, and that round he put together was clinical. And then I think the come down from what we heard from his camp on Saturday was just worn out. You know, everything kind of just, the adrenaline, as you pointed out, sort of wore off. But all that being said, he just showed his class, not just by the way he finished over the weekend and what he did on Friday, but then also how whenever I saw him, he was walking past a police person and shaking their hands and saying, hey, appreciate you and stuff like this. So it was just another chance for Scotty Scheffler to kind of build the legend that he's busy building with the golf clubs in hand. The cool thing about this is Scotty has been now known as the golfer who's almost unbeatable, and he doesn't miss and he doesn't beat himself, and he's sort of relentless. Now Scotty's got this kind of weird, cool element about him, and you saw the crowds running around with T-shirts on because now he's a bit of a gangster, if you will. And so it's like the legend just grew in front of us too, and then he backed it up with some fantastic playing on Sunday, which you sort of expected. So look, all in all, he didn't win, but it was an incredible week for Scotty Scheffler and for us who got to cover him.
Scotty Scheffler is in a class of his own. It's a class that Jon Rahm used to live in, Greg, and I want to get your quick thoughts on what went wrong for Rahm this week. He misses the cut. He did not play well at the Masters, and now we're left wondering what's next for the former #1 player in the world.
Yeah, it's similar to what we spoke about with Bryson. There's a very limited schedule, and it's very difficult for us to forecast what's going to happen going forward because it's something we're unfamiliar with. It's something we haven't paid a whole lot of attention to, at least the general viewing public. So that presents a challenge. But the other thing is it's not just a unique opportunity for us to see Jon Rahm come and play in an event that we're watching. It's also unique for him to get in front of this type of media coverage, this type of press conference with these types of difficult questions that he faces. And it seems to have thrown him off so far, at least in the first 2 majors of the year. He was very frustrated. He looked on the golf course on Thursday like a volcano that was about to explode. And it seemed he's been a little hot-headed in the past before and a little emotional and figured out how to play through it. But this seemed to frustrate him to a whole new level. So I'm very curious, perhaps concerned is the word to use, concerned about his headspace and just how he's generally feeling about things when he does come into these events. It's very different watching Jon Rahm handle himself around a major and watching, say, Bryson DeChambeau. Who would be the other end of the spectrum.
It's a fascinating dynamic indeed. We've done plenty of looking back. We're going to now look ahead to the 3rd major championship of the year and just to a few more days to the Charles Schwab Challenge. We're going to continue the First Cut podcast live on the CBS Sports Network after this break. Well, welcome back to the First Cut podcast live on CBS Sports Network. Let's look ahead, gentlemen, and let's look way ahead to next month's U.S. Open. Mark, it is Pinehurst #2, a course that we know, a course that should be very familiar to us, and a course with plenty of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you look at the golf course, look, it's iconic, and you look at the list of winners there, that's pretty iconic too. And to me, it's sort of characterized by guys that have a really calm demeanor. Now, I know you wouldn't think Payne Stewart, given the outrageous clothes, would be kind of have that calm demeanor on a golf course, but he is. And then you look at Martin Kaymer and Michael Campbell, it's the same sort of thing. But if you drew if you threw a blanket over those guys, you'd see guys that were really good iron players. So as you look at this list here, the guys that jump off the page are Scheffler and Schauffele and the really good iron players. So I feel like it's going to be the kind of place where you're going to see the blue chips kind of show up again. You'll have the Jason Gore type story, but I feel like we'll have a blue chip winner for the U.S. Open again.
Colonial this week, Greg, it'll look a lot different, but the field will be pretty strong.
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing this new, redone, regrassed golf course, a version of a classic in Colonial Country Club. And Scotty Scheffler's name sits on top at plus 280 to win the golf tournament outright. Just incredibly short odds. And you know what? He's deserving of it. So, yeah, I'm looking at Scotty this week.
He's deserving of it. They are piling up right behind him, and Gil Hans has gotten his little claws on this place. We'll see how it looks, and we're looking forward very much to getting there and getting this underway as the summer of golf continues. If you like what you've heard from myself, Mark Immelman, and Greg DuCharme, you can find us on the First Cut podcast, which can be downloaded and subscribed wherever you get your pods.